I wore blue for you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm so excited to have you here. I'm Lana, and
Uh-huh.
I have a podcast series platform, whatever you want to call it, called Conscious Conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And it really stemmed from my service that I created, my
Mm-hmm.
business, my
Mm-hmm.
mission, which is called Conscious Concierge.
Mm-hmm.
What I do with Conscious Concierge is help people find different tools, modalities, teachers, practitioners, retreats, things like that,
Mm-hmm.
that resonate for them to heal and expand their consciousness. So I'm sort of the person in the middle, connecting them with all of these different options.
Very good. Very,
Thank
very
you.
good.
Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
a lovely. There's so many interesting opportunities these days in so many different ways. Very good.
Yeah. And it can get a little confusing. That's how I felt.
To put it mildly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been wanting to have you on, and I've been following your Instagram and your YouTubes and all of your content for a bit. And
Mm-hmm.
I always start my episodes with sharing with the person what I really admire about them.
Mm-hmm.
And while I don't know you personally, I find your work just really resonates with me. And
Mm-hmm.
I really admire your teachings on life.
Mm-hmm.
And I also come from a Jewish background
Mm-hmm.
and have explored a lot spiritually. I remember you speaking about the Holocaust, which is really near and dear to my heart. My grandfather was in the Holocaust. So, um, yeah, those entanglements have affected the family. And I love your perspective on that. And I love your teachings on life. What has really caught my attention the most is when you talk about death.
Mm.
This is the topic I was really looking for a while. Who did I want to have this episode with? Because this topic has been a source of fear since I was a child. I think it's a source of
Mm.
fear for so many of us. I really would love to dive into today with you and
Oh, well.
explore deeper if that's okay with you.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. I'm very eager
Oh,
to talk about that subject. It always, far from being fearful to me, it's always sort of been a great white light to me. And so it's wonderful. I'm very glad. Oh, splendid. Let's do this.
since I was a very young girl, I've had fears of death. As far back as I can remember.
Mm.
I would sleep with my mom in her room, and I was very concerned that someone was going to kill us or that,
Mhm.
rational fear, even for a child. And as a person who
Wow.
has been on the path for quite some time,
Right.
I stumbled upon your content that was about it's not to be feared. So yeah, I would love to go into
Mm.
that. And I guess we could start with just telling us a little bit about yourself and really what your teachings are rooted in.
Mm. Very interesting, my dear. Well, of course, the fact that your grandfather was in the Holocaust would make the whole insecurity of life itself much more vivid from a very, very early age.
Yeah.
Okay, no, but of course, then, therefore,
Yeah.
okay, so you asked me a direct question, so let me just answer that. My own life experience, at this age, I'm not quite 80, but I'm pushing. I'm on the near side of it. Um, when I was 22, which was now quite a long time ago, I met a magnificent teacher, Swami Kriyananda,
Mhm.
American man, Indian name, direct disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda. His pictures are actually right behind me. Autobiography of a Yogi is the classic text. Almost everyone who's moves into this sector reads Autobiography of a Yogi. And so Kriyananda, um, being, well, he was twice my age at that point, um, was born early enough to have actual living time with Yogananda for 4 years, the last 4 years. And I was a truth seeker really from the time I was born. And but I had never met anyone in this world who uh, who had the answers to the questions that I was asking. As soon as I saw him, literally, he walked into the room, Now, by now, reincarnation is such a fundamental, integral part of my understanding. I was meeting him again. It was just as simple as that. Oh, there you are. There was no adjustment period. It was just, that's it. And here I am more than 60 years later, and 60, let me do the math. Yeah. And I've never wavered ever in that. So my entire life has been dedicated to spiritual practice, meditation, Kriya Yoga. Swami Kriyananda, Swamiji, I call him. He created an organization called Ananda, of which I am a part. Part of our particular gift is communities, residential communities. So I've helped start 2 of these, and have lived in community for all these years also. And I've always had a good mouth on me. So,
Me too.
so I had more than 40 years of very close friendship with Swami Kriyananda. He was very, very generous to me and to thousands of others in sharing his teachings. So what I do is I share it. That's my whole life definition in all kinds of ways, but that's what I do.
And so I heard you in one of the clips talk about how you grew up being Jewish, or you're of Jewish origins.
I was born into a Jewish family in 1947, which is, of course, right after the Second World War. So, and in the U.S., my family was not personally touched by it. All of my relations had come out of Eastern Europe, but earlier. But it was always vivid in my consciousness that that there was no security in this world.
Yeah.
That everything could just be taken from you in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
You know, in the United States, we're watching a lot of our systems be challenged in ways they've never been challenged before. This is like, oh yeah, of course, this is what happens.
Yeah.
And so my family was secular, not observant,
Hmm.
but the identity and the characteristics of being Jewish and that heritage have always had a strong effect on me.
Hmm.
I surprised myself by continually identifying as Jewish. And I
So,
ask myself sometimes, why do I keep doing this after all this time?
yeah.
It's a small part of my identity now. So much has been added to it, but
Yeah.
it's also, you know, there's a quality of creativity in the context of Ananda, which we started in the 60s. It's like the Jewish people are always in the forefront of revolutions.
Mhm.
Whatever revolution is, whether it's science or math or art or war or politics, Jews are always in the front. And so the effect of being Jewish on me was that you really have to think creatively and you have to think for yourself.
Yeah.
And a great unwillingness just to take other people's point of view. Um, but I've never been discriminated against. I've never experienced ever, not even for 1 minute, any negative repercussions of this. So
Yeah.
it's more like it's the way it formed my character and the ethical, social justice aspect of it, and plus the mouth.
Same. I'm like, I have so many topics I want to explore. I mean, um, the the things I really want to cover with you that I'm so curious your perspective is there's so many ideologies, there's so many religions, there's so many teachings, there's so many prolific people, there's so many ways to think and things to believe in. And this is where I help people, right? I help people to know what's out there when they're starting to peek the under the veil, and start to grow the consciousness. But even for me, I started this because that was a deep process for me of like, who's to say they're right? It's just, how do people know what is true? Is it just what's true for them? Or do you really feel there's one way and
Oh
one?
goodness. Well, the ancient traditions of India are really India is the guru of the planet. Don't think in terms of present conditions or anything like that. India is the only continuous civilization. Every other great civilization has risen and fallen and What's in Egypt now was not in Egypt before, but India has been a continuous civilization for thousands of years. Many, many changes over the time. But when you go to the Indian tradition, you find clarification on many things that you don't find anywhere else. And so the principle that has come through the ancient Indian tradition is called Sanatan Dharma. And the word Hinduism, which is how we think about it now, that was not an indigenous word. The English created the word Hinduism. It was never there. But these people were doing things that the English weren't doing. They lived next to the Indus River, and they gradually became Hindus. But Sanatan Dharma is the true meaning. And Sanatan Dharma is translated in two ways. One, people call it the eternal religion, but I think that's not as helpful as the definition that is simply that which is. And Sanatan Dharma is simply that which is the way that we are made. And every great master who's ever been born, Jesus Christ, Moses, Buddha, Krishna, and in more modern times, Yogananda, and they say there's others. Okay. They're Christs. Jesus Christ is a title. It means the anointed one. And they have raised their own consciousness through many incarnations of spiritual searching to have an infinite perspective that is completely transcends all limitations. The great masters have a revelation. It's not an intellectual deduction. It's a revelation. It's a direct perception of. I mean, Albert Einstein had a direct perception of, and then he had to work out all the math, but he saw it first. So you have a revelation, and then that revelation has power, and it communicates to the disciples of whoever it is. Then generations pass, and revelation becomes religion. And religion is souls who are maybe very sincere, very, very deeply spiritual, but they are not having a direct revelation. They are taking the words and the practices and they're trying to figure them out, and then they gradually turn into religions. And when you have worked it all out in this particular way, it doesn't match this one over here. But if you go back to the source and you actually look at what they're all saying the same thing.
Right. That's how I feel. They're all saying the same thing in
Right.
different ways.
In different ways. The way it's expressed is like this. Every master has this, every avatar. The word avatar has unfortunately gained a terrible meaning in our present time, but avatar is the right word. It's the fully realized soul who incarnates in a physical body with no karma of their own, merely in order to revitalize the message. But they have the same state of consciousness, but once the master incarnates, he has to communicate to the culture that he's in, to the people he's with, in terms that they will understand. So it to the unaware, it can sound different, but it isn't different. It's just expressed so that they'll understand it. Jesus talks about sheep and sheaves of wheat and wineskins, and we have this big problem as to whether or not if our sheep falls into the ditch on the Sabbath, should we pull the sheep out? And so you start pondering that, and then you realize, well, I don't have any sheep. I've never had a sheep. And, and come to think about it, I'm not restricted on the Sabbath either. But so it sounds esoteric, but it wasn't. Yogananda talks about television and radio and movies and airplanes and spaceships, which of course Jesus couldn't talk about any of those things. So it all starts sounding different. And then gradually religions start fighting with each other.
Yeah. That's
Yeah. But we're moving back out of that. You see, what's happening now is this denomination. I mean, there's both the forward moving energy and then there is the reaction to the forward moving energy. So it's polarizing. So a very large number of people are becoming increasingly free and are looking to the actual vibration and energy. And then another group are panicked about this movement and are gripping, with an iron hand, the more rigid, the better. And, we're heading for a smash up.
Yeah, it feels that way. I'm like holding on to my seatbelt right now with the energy
Mm-hmm.
going on. Yeah, it's definitely something I ponder a lot, of having especially such close family members being so deep in their faith and so pure and so genuine, but so sure of their path.
Well, when you ask that question, it's like there's multiple things going on when people choose. We all have karma. We all have certain lessons that we're trying to learn. We incarnate into a situation that will give us exactly the context we need in order to learn those lessons. And so the need to be very rigid in your faith and hold on to it and not allow any
Mm,
contradictory words to come in is a very necessary, and for those people an essential and ultimately helpful stage, not because it's enduringly true, but because in their progression from delusion to enlightenment, this is what they have to do right now. And it it either serves them because anything less rigid they wouldn't be able to hold on at all, or it serves them because they need to learn the limitations of such rigidity and have to go past it. There can be all kinds of reasons. It can be just a desire to be superior to other people. I mean, the karma can't be dogmatized because all karma is individual. So you can't, it's not good karma for you or for me to try to dissuade someone from the faith that they're holding on to,
yeah,
because
yeah,
they need it or else they wouldn't be doing it.
yeah. I remember feeling envious growing up actually, because my mom's Italian, again, my dad's Jewish, but he didn't choose to be Orthodox the way they did. But I would see their family and see their unit, and they're so solid. They're so rooted in God. They have such unshakable faith. And I remember feeling like, because so much of my life has been a quest for faith and that trust. And I would
Mm.
see it in them of how deep they were connected to that.
Yeah, right. It's very, and you can see that would be one of the karmic reasons why you would want to be part of that,
Mm.
because you would be looking for that kind of security. It would be necessary for your personal growth. And yeah, it's enviable. But if it looks too narrow to you, you can't embrace it just for security.
That's how I feel. And that's why I ask you this question, because I feel like there's a lot of there's a lot of people searching, right, for that. And I've been in so many teachings in so many different spaces and learnings to find what is my unshakable faith. Because on our
Hmm.
topic today about death, I really believe the fear that people like myself experience when they're so afraid of death is because of a lack of faith.
Of course, well, lack of understanding. Faith is a hard word, but it's just a lack of understanding of that which is. You see, this is where Sanatana Dharma comes into it. I mean, the obvious and most, what is death? And why don't people think about it more? And why are we so afraid of it? All those questions are, thank goodness you're asking those questions. I mean, this is why Buddha renounced the world. He finally found out that people died. And he said, but this is incredible. We're just living every day as if we're not going to die. How stupid is this? And he just walked away from everything because he felt it was the single most important question to solve.
So
It,
important.
yeah, that which is. But faith is not like something that you just like get faith. It's that you begin to try to understand what is going on here. And the upgrade or the innovation, so to speak, that well, actually it's true of all Sanatana Dharma, but what Yogananda particularly brought was he did not bring dogma. And the little pamphlet that was written that he brought when he first came to America in 1920 is called The Science of Religion. And the reason he said that was because the fundamental premise of science is that you have a possible hypothesis that might be true, and then you conduct the proper experiment to find out if it is true. So your decision about what is valid is not based because some authority told you it must be, or because we all think it's true, so therefore don't you want to be part of that group. It's because I have tested this. in my actual life. And so my faith is based on experience. And when you have an actual experience of something, it's not like you say, well, now I have faith. It's no, like I know this because I went through it.
Yeah.
But part of this is the experiment cannot be finished in the brief cycle of birth to death. So there are certain fundamentals when you start talking about Sanatan Dharma, about that which brings us right back to death, which is, have we ever lived before? Am I a blank slate when I'm born? Does the whole story just end and it all gets wiped out and I start over or I go into nothingness? I mean, these are not very reasonable ideas based on a little bit of observation about the experience that we have. First of all, we are so self-evidently born so differently. And we have all these reactions. When I was first introduced to reincarnation, it was when I was 18 years old, thank God. And it didn't make any more sense to me than it made to anyone else. I'm Western in the Jewish tradition. Subsequently, you find out that reincarnation is part of Judaism. It was also in early Christianity going on with that. But
Yeah. But they don't believe, I thought they don't believe in reincarnation.
not, well, it depends on who you ask, and it depends on what documents they look at.
Yeah.
And there's, I mean, we could go so many directions here if we had all day. but the end point is, so reincarnation is presented to me. So what I did was I didn't just take it on faith, so to speak. It was like I started having that as a template in my mind. And when I would see situations that were confusing to me, I would think, well, what if this was not my first lifetime? If this relationship started before this moment, if this is just a continuation of what happened before, if this deep-seated fear in me of going out on a boat is because I drowned in a previous lifetime, then this fear is not so irrational. Like many, many things that made no sense at all made perfect sense if I put reincarnation into the story, especially reincarnation as in an intelligent way, not I'm a human today and a goat tomorrow and then the king of England the next time, but that it's really simple. From birth to the point we are right now, we have been able to chart a natural progression of understanding. And in fact, if you really think about it, that what we call progress is an increase in awareness.
Mhm.
We do not actually acquire, we just become aware of possibilities that we didn't know before.
I saw you talk about how if I if I learn that like if I become more aware and I understand that the rest was buried, how much
Yeah,
more can I uncover? I think about that
exactly.
a lot.
No, and that's really true. And that's the attitude that
Mhm.
we need to start working with, so that we can't just say, I know it all right now, because I know things now that I didn't know 5 years ago that were not invented today.
Yeah.
They were just uncovered for me. So that moves us forward to what happens when this body, am I this body or am I just wearing this body? It's such a simple question. And a great deal of spiritual practice is who am I? And then there's whole lineages of yoga practice that are based on who am I?
Mm.
And when Yogananda talks about it, it's like we adopt a very limited self-definition based on the fact of what our brain and our senses tell us and what our conscious mind can actively remember. So then I have these parents, I have this culture, I have this ethnicity, I've had these experiences. And when you say, who am I? Well, that's me. This is my name, and you can only have this body, you can only have the characteristics, you only have one family. Is that really all there is? Is that really the case? I mean, I don't myself have children, but people who have multiple children tell you, the women will say, from conception, this was an individual.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, there's somebody there.
Yeah.
And in the same family and in the same upbringing, you can be so different.
Yeah. I think, yeah, this, I like what you were talking about, how faith is not just something you say you have, it's like an experience. And I think I listen to a lot of these teachings and I'm always like, do I believe that? Do I believe that? Do I want to believe that? Do I believe that? You know, and expect,
Uh-huh.
especially experience with plant medicine. And I'm going to ask you about that in a little too.
Uh-huh.
But I think, yeah, this concept for me, since I was a young girl, I've been very existential. I've always wondered, what are we doing here? Why are we
Mm-hmm.
here? What does all of this mean? And then that has increased as my consciousness has increased. But sometimes I feel it plagues me. Like I can't live. I can't just be here because I'm just constantly wondering why and what. And when will we know? And how do people who teach know with such certainty, like yourself, that there is something beyond here? And that lately has been very looping in my mind.
Oh, good. Very good. But, part of, and one of the reasons that I'm persuaded on this is that I've worked very hard to understand, to study, to compare, to introspect, to meditate. This is not like I am, you might notice, I'm not a person, I'm not gullible. And I mean, to the annoyance of everybody, including Swami Kriyananda, well, he was not annoyed, but he just had to deal with it.
Yeah.
I
Like,
I trust myself. And so if it doesn't make sense to me, when I was with Swamiji all those years, and still true, Swami Kriyananda explained it himself. He read Autobiography of a Yogi when he was in New York City. 5 days later, he crossed the United States. He had been initiated as a monk and a disciple, and he was living in an ashram. He didn't even know the word guru before that, and then there he was, because he had this intuitive recognition. However, he said, I accepted Yogananda's authority unhesitatingly, but not unquestioningly.
mm,
And that was the relationship I was in with Swami Kriyananda. Intuitively, I knew that he knew what I wanted to know and didn't know. But that did not make me unable able to put my own intelligence aside. I simply
yeah,
couldn't. So I
yeah,
could not, and so in many cases I could neither accept nor reject. So I just built a little mental shelf and I just put things in a box over here.
yeah,
And many of them have sat there for many, 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 many decades. But one by one, they come out because now my experience allows me to understand what he was saying to me. And so all of a sudden, oh, that's what he meant.
yeah,
Even to yesterday, oh, that's what he meant. I never really understood that. Now I see it. And then I'm standing on solid ground. I don't have to be afraid because I know how I got here and I know why I'm here. So the certainty is not based on a need to be certain. The certainty is based on my experience has shown me. And at a certain point, I trust myself.
yeah.
And the fact that you've been existential since you were born, that's great, good karma.
Hmm.
You know, the way it works is, think about this for a minute. It's like we have two realities that are always playing. One is, I will be happier if I can just snuggle down and be comfortable and not have to strain against things. In other words, we try to find comfort by lowering our consciousness. That's why people drink alcohol. This is why they take drugs. This is why they overeat. That's why they become obsessively sexual. That's
Mm,
why they watch television. This is why you scroll. I don't feel so good. I'm going to lower my consciousness and then I'll feel better.
yeah.
The problem is very, very simple problem. It don't work.
Don't work. To go back to the blue pill. I'm on the red pill and I want to go back to the blue.
Yeah, it don't work. And so what we gradually realize is that ever increasing awareness is where our true happiness, security, fulfillment comes from. But of course, it takes more energy. And when you watch all the people around you, with all due respect, who are just sleeping their way through one more incarnation,
Yeah.
they're not troubled.
Looks so peaceful.
Yeah, but it isn't. It's a complete illusion. It just isn't.
Yeah. I so many things. But I do sometimes, when I go back to New Jersey where I'm from and I'm sitting, I always tell my mom, like I'm sitting at lunch and everyone's just talking about like the groceries and the cabinets and like and I'm just sitting there like, are the aliens here now or were they like, and it's just a constant exploration. And I think it's beautiful. And sometimes I just feel I wish I could just turn it off, and
But yeah,
just,
but you can't.
you can't.
It just very interestingly, I was kind of a late developing child. I mean, physically, so I'm like 12 or 13 and I'm still just a little runty girl like this. Plus I had this big brain and this big mouth. So let's just say the boys didn't like me all that much, at a time when you're trying to be liked. And so I'm sitting at this is a true experience. I'm sitting in somebody's basement for one of those horrible middle school parties. And like, nobody's asking me to dance, like zero. And I'm just sitting against the wall. And this really happened to me. I think it was an angelic visitation. There was this voice that came to me that said, I could make you like them. Yeah. And I said, no, I'm not going to take it. I mean, I know who I am. I know what's been given to me. But it was real interesting. It's like, yeah, you could be like them, but then you're going to have to shut all this down.
Yeah.
So but what you need, and of course you're working on it, you need kindred spirits.
And that's the thing. I have such beautiful community. So I feel like, I feel super blessed. There's such a beautiful community here where, I'm constantly spending time with those kindred spirits, and I've learned to live in the duality for sure. And I think that
But it's also it's a very, see, what you are is you're caught between the part of you that knows you have to wake up and the part of you that wishes that you
yes,
didn't.
yes,
And
mhm,
that's a particular stage of development,
yes,
a necessary stage of development until you pass through and realize, no, I have to wake up.
yeah,
It's more than that. It's that you, and I mean, we're using you as an example, but
mm,
a person would still imagine that unconsciousness would be good. But there comes a point where unconsciousness becomes repellent. It's just you can't bear that thought anymore.
yeah,
And then there's no conflict anymore. You
yeah,
just go forward. This is the way. There's no other way to do it. Which
yeah.
is probably really where you are, but you're still spinning this. Okay, so you know, we're experiencing the death. We're having the death experience all the time. I'm of an age where I'm not. I'm old. My body's old. Every so often, I look in the mirror and I'm shocked. How did I get this way? I see earlier pictures of myself, and my body's not the same. My face, my hair, nothing is the same. And a little piece of me goes, ooh, like that. Like ooh, like this. I've had close relationships in my life that have fallen apart. Each one of these are self definitions that get taken away from you. And everyone is a tremendous sense of changed identity and the grief that comes with it. So the death experience, this is, we were touching this a moment ago. Am I my body, or do I merely live in my body? And every time our whole identity is ripped away from us and we have to start over again, which happens to some of us at different times, pieces of our identity, then you discover on the other side of it that I'm really still myself and there's a new adventure here. Now, taking off our body is literally just like changing your clothes. It's like that, which when you change your clothes, I have this on today, I'll put on my pajamas tonight, I'll put on something else tomorrow. The consciousness within all of those different outfits, so to speak, I always know who I am. I always have my story. I always know what's going on. When I was younger and had a much more interesting wardrobe and could change my reality a whole lot more, you know, I would be a green person in pants and I would be a blue person in a dress, and
Yeah.
and it would really affect me, but it would never define me because my self-definition and my awareness of self were completely independent upon what I was wearing. So at least in theory, if you can't even get it in practice, we take off this body and all of a sudden we realize, oh my gosh, because I've had it on for so long, I mistakenly thought that that was actually me. And this is all the death and return experiences that people say, the startling realization that my body is gone, but I'm still here.
But how are those people communicating if they're gone? Are these like downloads that people have
Oh,
gotten?
good heavens, these days you can just type in near death and return experiences and you can spend the rest of the next year just reading all those books. And some of them are more credible than others. But there is this incredible consistency, which is completely consistent with the ancient teachings of Sanatana Dharma. And let's just go see. This is what meditation, true meditation is. True meditation is to discover that I do not need a physical body to be aware. That my awareness inhabits the physical body. It's not created by the physical body.
Mm.
Because what we're so afraid of is that we're going to be snuffed out and that we'll just lose everything and cease to exist.
Yeah.
The truth of it is no such luck. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like you never escape your individual consciousness. Never.
It just keeps going forever.
Yes, it does.
Just keep reincarnating forever.
No, because there's an end point.
When's the
Okay. And the end point is we are constantly moving. Now come back to increasing awareness. We experience a progressive capacity to choose we experience a progressive capacity to influence our state of consciousness and not merely be subject to external events. Okay? And we begin to understand what the keys are. And there's really two questions. This is the science of religion. What causes lasting happiness? What causes suffering? And all of life is those two questions. Every single decision you ever make is based because you believe, sometimes falsely and stupidly, but you believe that this course of action will bring me happiness and reduce my suffering. And then we test it out. And the reason it takes us so many incarnations is that really, literally, we don't take anybody's word for anything. We have to have the experience. I mean, think about the drug addict. The drug addict believes that heroin is going to make me happy because it dulls my consciousness and makes me feel good. Turns out that wasn't such a good decision because it ultimately results in a lot of suffering. You think marrying this man whom everyone says is an alcoholic, but I think I can save him, is going to be a happiness producing, action. Turned out it wasn't.
Yeah, I've been there.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We've all been, okay. Turns out I'm a young woman. I'm really beautiful. I can just, as I've heard it put, I can just lead with my biology. A friend of mine who was extraordinarily beautiful, just hair, eyes, face, body, everything. She said she was so lazy because all she had to do was just walk into a room and the whole room would start spinning around her. And she gradually realized that was a catastrophe. So she got an unattractive haircut, bad glasses, and ugly clothes and got much, much happier. But the other thing that happens is, oh, I'm old. I read about
Too.
this wonderful bohemian artist who had very, very colorful life, many affairs, all these things, woman. She said, she was now 95 years old. She said, when a handsome young man walks into the room, my response to him is the same as it's always been. His response to me, however, is quite different. So, but you see, this is my choice. I think being young and beautiful is going to make me happy.
Yeah.
Well, how did that work out for you? Not so good. And so we just keep going through that time after time after time until we recognize that there is a continuous stream of consciousness which is unrelated to external circumstances. And one of the ways, and that's what you're asking about reincarnating.
Yeah.
We start, so to speak, with a whole lot of delusions. We have false ideas of what brings happiness and what brings suffering. over these many incarnations, and you are compelled. I was compelled. I just wasn't going to just run another one. I wasn't going to sleep through another one.
Yeah.
I was going to learn.
Yeah.
Because I recognized that there is an end point of this. And as I become more and more aware, I realize my awareness can become infinite.
And what's the end point?
And the end point is perfect bliss, God realization.
And
Everyone is going there.
where
Everyone is.
is that?
It's not physical. The
What,
very definition of it. Where is it? It's right here, right now. If Jesus Christ was sitting next to me, if Moses was on my left, if Yogananda was behind me, they would be experiencing a different reality. It's not in time or space or geography or physicality. It is my independent capacity to perceive that which is. This is Sanatana Dharma. And every religion is saying, do this, do this, do this, and all for the same reason.
yeah, exactly.
All for the same reason.
Exactly. So do you feel like the point of life is to become as conscious as possible?
Yes. And we just, it's all a matter. But you see, that sounds very abstract, but it isn't at all. Think about and become aware of what causes suffering and what causes happiness. And we find out through bitter experience. And you see, this changes our position in regard to suffering. This also changes our position in regard to death. Because we use this body as long as it serves us, and then we need an experience that's going to teach us something. And that may be an early death, a late death, a painful death.
That's the thing. It's like the idea of like, we don't know when. Like if tomorrow I was to die because that was my karma, it's like how do I comfortably live today knowing maybe tomorrow that's it?
There's a very good answer to that. You practice when it's easier all the time. How much of your happiness right now is dependent on making circumstances match what you want them to be? This is a stage of development. I have many classes on this
I
subject.
see. Yeah.
There's the second stage of development, if you want to call it that,
Hmm.
is when my happiness depends on the world conforming to what I want it to be. And that's most of our society right now. I get my house, I get my retirement, I
Yeah.
get my family, I get my husband, I get, blah, blah, blah. I get my beautiful body, I get my cheekbones fixed, I get my neck,
Really been
So
there.
so when everything is right, then it'll be okay. Except of course, it isn't. For two reasons. One is because it always wiggles out of your control. You can never make it stay because change is the only certainty. And the other reason is you don't live externally, you live inside yourself. And if your consciousness is not rooted to everlasting realities, you will always be nervous and insecure.
Yeah,
Period.
the goalpost always moves up when you say figure out what brings happiness versus suffering. But the thing is, I think the illusions, right? So thinking, waterfront and the cars and all the things will make us happy, and then we get them and we realize it's not it. But the
Mhm.
loop keeps looping. It finds a new loop.
But you see, already speaking for yourself, you're different than most of the people around you because you have tried it and learned.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that it's not that linear,
Hmm.
because we're all arrayed on a wheel and we're all moving toward the center. So it depends on what karma you're working out in that lifetime. But nonetheless, there's no question that you have woken up,
Yeah.
and you can't be content, and that you think they're happier, but they haven't faced into this yet.
So they will in another lifetime.
Of course they will, because when you die, nothing happens. Nothing changes. You're in a non-material world, which is a little hard for all of us to imagine. But your consciousness, let's say your vibration between enlightenment and total delusion, your vibration remains the same. And then when you're born at that vibration.
So when
And
I
then you
in
start,
my next incarnation, I'll be this conscious plus more.
Yes, plus more, because you get to learn in the in-between period.
Where do you go in the in-between
And
period?
there is apparently the astral world, the energy universe, which is very similar to this one. This one is actually modeled on that one, except it's all better,
What if we don't
among other.
what if we don't
Uh-huh.
like it?
You would like it. Well, if you don't like it, okay. You, in that world, this is a heterogeneous world. Very shadowy people and very bright people are all next to each other. They can sit next to each other on the bus. That world, which is an energy world, the vibrations are homogeneous. So you're drawn to the vibratory universe that matches you. And there are also hells. If you have been an awful person, you will get you will experience that awfulness more deeply
Wow.
because the body dulls the experience. But you learn there, wow, this is not good.
Mm.
This is a bad time. You know, all that hate, all that anger I put out, all that cynicism, all that destructive energy. I'm experiencing it because I'm not insulated, I'm not dulled by the material plane. So you don't want to go there again. And there's angelic beings trying to help you. The way the universes work is there's always a higher vibration that's trying to help you and pull you up, just like this world. Everything in this world is repeated because that's the model. That's the architectural plan. This is the reality of it. So it's very reasonable. It's like school, you know. But for if you're like-minded and if you're truth seeking,
Mm.
the universe you go into will be harmonious with you. And it's delightful because everything is more in tune with you. But eventually, there's still karma, which is to say, still desires. I want to be young and beautiful again. You know, I want to have that nice house. I never quite got the exact house. And, you know, the guy I married was okay, but his brother was so much nicer. If I could just marry his brother, you know.
Yeah. Come back to Earth in the
Well,
card.
you come back to a material planet. Now, I'm a little beyond my portfolio here, but this is what Yogananda has taught, what I believe, because everything I can test, I know is true. And I have some intuition. But Yogananda said, quote, there are countless inhabited planets for us to go to.
Yeah.
But we just go back to a material world. And we can keep coming back to this when people reincarnate into the same family.
Yeah.
You know, you give birth to your own grandmother,
Yeah.
you know.
How do you feel like people can start to live more fully that have this fear of death
Oh,
in the present moment?
in intensely challenging moments of crisis, you will respond according to the pattern that you have presently established. So how you will deal with physical death at the end of your life is going to be an exact continuation of how you have lived your life. So if you are constantly in rebellion against everything that's happening, or if you are rising with courage to meet change, if you have a creative interest when circumstances shift and don't go your way, if you're always trying to learn rather than just insisting that this is the way things have to be, then when you begin to lose your body and your perceptions begin to shift. I've been at the bedside of a number of dying people, so I have an idea how this runs.
Mhm.
If you have trained yourself to be interested in new experiences, if you have trained yourself to experience life from the point of view of consciousness and not from the point of view of circumstances, then quite simply you'll be ready. And the degree to which you may have meditated and have become aware of the fact that consciousness does not depend on the brain. And then when the brain begins to malfunction, you don't think you have to go unconscious and you don't become afraid because you understand that consciousness does not depend on the brain. I have one, I can express my consciousness through it, but if I don't have one, there's other ways to be awake and aware. And so I'm losing these realities. Do I have a relationship with a higher reality, with God, with Divine Mother, who I have made a very strong part of my life? And therefore, when things begin to, the way I have solved my fears through my whole physical incarnation is I turn to God. So if I find myself becoming afraid, am I lost in a black sea of nothingness, or do I have the habit of turning to God for comfort? And all of those makes the entire experience. It still, we've been in our bodies for a long time. If you've always lived in the same house, in the same country, in the same language, you suddenly are transported to a completely different place. You could be a little insecure. But if you have an inner reality, it's
Yeah.
completely different.
How do you think people can develop that besides
Start
meditation and yoga? And
Your life is formed minute by minute by minute. There's no such thing as an unimportant moment in your life. Which way do I turn? Do I keep seeking unconsciousness for my comfort, or do I seek to become more awake? Do I comfort myself by expanding my awareness or by reducing it? Do I comfort myself by putting out less energy or by putting more energy out? Do I believe that I am the total power, or do I understand that there is a divine force in this world? Am I doing what I can to become friends with that divine force?
Hmm.
And this is why many people who are deeply devoted to Jesus,
Yeah.
they can have beautiful deaths, because regardless of how, quote, narrow or fundamental there might be, they know that Jesus is there. They know the love of Jesus. And when they begin to leave this world, they are so sure that they're going to Jesus. And that is truth. That's completely true. However, they got there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and so, on a day to day basis, do you solve your problems by strengthening your ego and battling it out, just me? Or do we soften our hearts and form a relationship, however we want to do it, with some reality greater than just this mind and its preferences?
That's such a beautiful way to put it. And um, I wanted to get your opinion on plant medicine. I've seen you put out something about psychedelics. I've
Did
explored myself because of looking for that connection, and I've experienced many things in that world. I do believe, similar to your LSD experience that you talked about, that it has expanded my consciousness. And I also believe in having that experience and integrating it into my life, and it not being the place I need to continue to go to for that connection. Um,
right.
how do you feel the plant medicines like ayahuasca and psilocybin and those things play into consciousness?
Well, if it's enlightenment is not a free gift. You have to face and overcome every idea that you're holding on to that is contrary to the ultimate truth, which is that we are one with spirit, and that spirit is a state of bliss. And we were talking about it lightly, but these are very big conversations. All these whirlpools, vrittis they're called, which are stored in our chakras, which is a deeply held belief that my happiness depends on this. And everybody has a whole bunch of them. That's karma. My happiness depends on this. So I get to have a life experience which is going to test that theory and find out if it's true or not.
Mm.
Okay. And so there is no shortcut to that. This is an energy universe. I mean, this is science, that this is energy to energy. So there's a certain amount of energy committed to that single idea. And in order to dissolve that idea, you have to have commensurate energy that will convert that thought into a new thought. We mentioned, and I'm coming to ayahuasca in just a moment, but we'd mentioned the idea of perhaps being married to an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And what happens is, at first you think, I'm going to be happy doing this. You realize it's not going to work. And that idea has to be slowly transformed into a different idea. And that's what life experience does for us. Okay, when you chemically change your brain And it doesn't matter whether it was made in a laboratory or it was made by God as a plant. When you chemically change
Oh,
your
it doesn't.
brain, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. I know people try to assert that it does, but it
No.
doesn't.
Yep.
Once it's inside your body, it's a chemical reaction that changes your brain. And it changes your brain in a most interesting way, that you suddenly, with your more or less physical senses or with the brain that you're used to using, you have this suddenly expanded awareness. It's a very interesting mystery that that can happen. But because it's a chemical change, it's not that you have actually with your own determined energy transformed these limiting understandings into expanded understandings. You've gotten like the great book of life. Like if you're reading a book and you want to know how it ends, you go to the end and you read this, but you haven't really gone through the whole book. So you get a glimpse of how this story might end, but then the chemistry wears off and you're right back with all those karmas that you still have to have enough life experience to really transform them.
Mhm.
The chemical experience may loosen a few of those.
Yeah, I will show you them.
It'll show me. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
When back in 1965,
Hmm.
I had an LSD experience, and it was the first thing I'd ever done. I mean, I never had
Yeah.
alcohol, nothing. First experience I ever had that chemically changed my awareness was this huge dose of LSD. I came out of it and I said, "Oh my gosh, if I change my consciousness, I change everything."
Yeah.
And basically everything that I've done since then was catalyzed by that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the experience because it was just a chemical change. However, it was such a dramatic one that it just busted open this whole thought that I'd never had before.
Yes, that's what I feel it's given me.
Right.
Yeah.
And Swami Kriyananda, who did not favor drugs in any way, had to admit and freely admitted, but I see that it has catalyzed a lot of people.
Yeah.
However, if you then become attached
Yes.
or begin to mistakenly think that being able to step into that state of greater awareness is actual spiritual development, it's a very dicey thing, because when you come back, you are not necessarily actually changed. Your vrittis are not necessarily released and transformed. You just now have an even more, sometimes helpful, but more often more confusing idea of what your own state of enlightenment is.
That's such a good way to put it. I feel every word of that. I've sat with ayahuasca 13 times through the course
Mm-hmm.
of my life, and I have gotten awareness into what my karmas are. Like, for example, when it took me to a death and I was dying and my heart was going, and it was like right before, like there was no reality anymore. I was no person. I was just death. And after that, I was very, very rattled. And what I realized each time I would have these experiences was like, oh, that's still there. That process, that fear, that emotion that I'm carrying, that my anger, these things, but the work that I have to do to get through the fear of death and to I've been dealing with a lot of physical health things because I believe it's everything trying to come up and it's manifesting physically. From here, now we do the work, right? Now we really do the work. So I think this is such a timely conversation. Um,
Good.
yeah.
Very, very
And
good.
I like that, that resonates for me, that perspective.
There's one more slight, just refinement on it. Everything you said is exactly right, which is, having these transcendent experiences is not the definition of being enlightened. Being enlightened is the capacity at all times to choose happiness, to choose your state of consciousness, to be aware of the divine within you. The fact that you can chemically give yourself a big aha is not the same as in everyday life at all times having dissolved the vrittis and being able to choose your own state of consciousness. And it's addictive. It's
It
very
is.
attractive.
People get very
Yeah.
lost in that world.
While we're talking about, let me add this last thing. People also talk to me about microdosing
Yes.
therapeutic. And I have less understanding of that. I
Yeah.
mean, I have very little understanding of experience of any of this,
Yeah.
but there is it has the same potential pitfall. The question is not whether in the moment of chemical shift you can perceive things, it's whether or not that perception actually enables you to do the work more effectively.
Yes.
And so I'm open to it because I know we we can't be a mystery to ourselves. We have to gradually come to understand who I am, what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, what my confusions are. That's how we begin to work. And so if it helps you genuinely towards self-understanding, that's great. But I don't think in itself it can solve the issue.
Yeah.
It can only awaken you to the issue.
And I guess the same could be said for like an SSRI, right? Like an anti-anxiety. Like if it allows you to be able to do the work without such distraction, I guess.
Well, it's just we need all the help we can get. This is really the same question that Jesus was asked when he was asked, "How can you tell a true prophet from a false prophet?" And he said, "By their fruits you shall know them." So it's like, what is the effect? Is this a true aid, or is this just a distraction? Or, I mean, we desperately, all of us want shortcuts. I mean, we're always asking, isn't there an easier way? So is this just an attempt to bypass what I really need to do?
Yeah.
Or is this genuinely serving me? So you have to be very, very, very self-honest
I love
about it.
that. I feel like everything is either medicine or not medicine, right? And I've explored a lot the idea of SSRIs, and at a time where I felt like I have never taken them, but I've definitely, in the moments of despair where I felt like I needed them, I would ask myself, do you need them because you feel psychologically unstable? Where there's been moments I felt that way, and you want to continue the work, or do you feel like it's another thing you think you need, but really you just need to sit in this psychological confusion, chaos, and discomfort?
Yeah, precisely. That's precisely true. And this is the stages of growth. On my YouTube channel, there's hundreds of hours and personal development, dealing with emotional states. I mean, all of this can be very clearly delineated and you can see yourself in it. At a certain stage, this is how I try to solve problems. At another stage, this is how I try to solve them. Where does pain come from? What alleviates pain? What is a good relationship? Where does happiness come from? And it progresses. And depending on where you are, and we're not unified. Like
Yeah.
we can be extremely, I mean, this is common sometimes, especially seemingly for many people, but also for women. You can be super in your career and absolutely remedial in your personal romantic relationships.
Yeah.
And and so in your remedial relationships, you have to solve your problems in a certain way. And in your career, you can solve them at a different level because we're not unified.
Yeah. I love what you said too about that was super profound about when you come back from those psychedelic experiences, there's a confusion on how enlightened you are. So my brother would say, wow, you have different language. You have different vocabulary, and you are just very enlightened. And what I found was I was speaking very enlightened and I was in enlightened circles, but I feel what you say with every fiber, and I'm very aware of it now. It's why I decided to just pause and really focus on these other kinds of modalities, because I feel my inside needed to catch up with those words.
That's exactly right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And see, and that can become very dangerous
I,
over time
yes.
because the division between what you think you are and what you actually are, and the confusion, real deep confusion can set in, especially when it has this huge culture around it where this is a path to enlightenment. And this, again, I have the advantage of age here because, my whole tribe, as I call it, my whole vintage, we all came up through the psychedelics. I mean, I was in where I am right now, right near San Francisco. I mean, we were the beating heart of this whole thing. And, um, wait, hold on. Oh, yes. But I've been able to watch the different paths that people have taken, and I've been able to see the result, not in a week or a month, but over 50 years.
Yeah.
And I wish I could say that those who have taken the chemical route are bright, shining, free beings, but I have not seen that. I have not seen, unfortunately, a single example of that,
Yeah.
which makes me insecure about recommending it, no
Yeah.
matter how people argue for it. This is sort of what Swami Kriyananda had to concede. I've seen it. I've seen it be a good catalyst as a spiritual path. I would like to see it more effective than I have seen it.
Yeah.
Meaning, sure, if it would work, I'd be all for it. I'm not a prude. I don't care.
Yeah.
But it seems questionable. That question way back at the beginning, how do I find my own way? You have to listen to yourself.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, seriously, you can't always judge a path or a teacher. Even if the teacher was still in the body, you might not really be able to gauge their consciousness. And so many of the teachers are not on this planet anymore. Or, Jesus Christ, start there. But you look at the people who follow that path, and not just everyone, but the ones who are really attractively, deeply dedicated to it. And did they, do you want to become like them?
Yeah.
Because they are showing you what the result of this is. When I met Swami Kriyananda, I did not have any connection to Yogananda. In fact, I didn't even particularly like his autobiography. I was very intellectual, and it just didn't strike me. But Swami Kriyananda was the first person I'd ever seen that I wanted to be like. And he said that he was a disciple of Yogananda. And if I liked him, I had to like Yogananda. And
Yeah.
so it like my faith in Yogananda and his path is because I saw the fruit in Swami Kriyananda,
Yeah.
which goes back to Jesus. How can you tell a true prophet from a false?
Yeah. Okay, I have one last question, but one point I
Sure.
want to wrap on that on the plant medicine was the people that I've seen, I feel like that I really am like, wow, this path has been so like they embody like the enlightenment and the beauty. They live typically in the jungle where the
Hmm.
medicine is, I think it's very hard to live here and be on that path.
And it's not just that it's hard to live here. It's that substance is part of an entire way of relating to reality. This is,
Yes.
I think of this in terms of the Native Americans.
Yes.
They were so integrated to the
Yes.
sun, the moon, the stars, the plants, the animals, that they had to do all of it. You couldn't just pick a little piece of it out and think it would work. This is
Yes.
their day-to-day reality fed
Yeah.
um, the whole style. So yes, I think that's very true.
Totally agree. Yeah.
And that's a
There.
very good point. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm very, very deep in my studies of everything right now. Especially, I
Very
take
good.
this role very serious, this self-proclaimed role to help guide people to the different paths. And I have plant medicine as an option for people, and I send them to safe spaces. And so, same with functional medicine and naturopathic medicine and all of these places. So I'm always evaluating, you know, the
Interesting.
and
Huh.
yeah, I'm always evaluating based on my own consciousness of like and relearning, and also really take the responsibility pretty serious that people trust me to connect them to these different things.
Yeah.
So it
But
feels
what interesting karma for you. I mean, you really must have been. I mean, what I love to make up past life stories. I mean, I make them up. Some of them I come to believe are true intuition. It's like, why would you do this? Like maybe you were trapped in some previous incarnation in some very narrow sect that never allowed you to explore anything. And you just got so frustrated at just never being allowed to know anything except what was being fed to you. That when you got control of your own life, I'm just going to explore every darn thing there is out there.
And help others do it too. And then
Exactly.
I'm just always changing my perspective. Last thing, I won't keep you too long, that I've been deeply exploring that is also a part of my service, is physical health. So
Uh-huh.
I've lately been dealing with some physical health issues with
Mm.
the body and the stomach and everything. What is your in your practice and your teachings, what is your understanding of how physical illness manifests in the body? Do you
Well,
spiritually believe it's a spiritual manifestation?
well, in simple terms, everything is a manifestation is an energy pattern. The physical manifestation is the last expression. It's not the beginning, it's the end. We have ideas, we have energy, and then we have physical manifestation. So by the time something is manifested, there has to be a mental, emotional, and a consciousness dimension behind it. But that doesn't mean that it's in any way a mistake, or that you're doing something wrong. So it's just that everything is a teacher and everything is an expression of the pattern. Physical manifestations are karma, and you can't judge the purpose of the karma merely by looking at the thing. You have to ask yourself, what response does this create within me? Does it cause me to feel fear? Does it cause me to feel unworthy? Does it cause me to feel guilty? Does it frighten me because I'm not going to be useful? Is it that I'm going to die?
Mm-hmm.
Just all of these things. And that's actually the karma. Because karma is something that karma is something that we're afraid of. And so we have to be at peace with it. We have to come to the point where our happiness no longer depends on external conditions matching our preferences. So when external conditions do not match our preferences, we have to go back and say, why do I hold these preferences? What am I afraid of if my preferences are not held? And then, of course, if you start unraveling it on that level, then you will be facing and transcending the karma. And then circumstances, not always, but circumstances will often shift
I feel,
because, well, I've learned it. That's what it is to work out the karma.
yeah,
Or it will no longer matter to you what the circumstances are.
yeah, I feel that deeply. Yeah, I've been going to my uncle's a doctor. I've been going to so many doctors, but my conscious self knows, well, there's something else to this. Yeah. And
And sometimes there are psychic doctors and others who can sometimes give you deeper causes, but of course you would know that because of what you're doing. But the biggest question is, how is this affecting me on on the level of consciousness? And it's always about fear because that's the definition of what karma is.
yeah,
So why am I afraid of that? And that obviously the answer to that can't be fast. Why am I afraid of
I know my answer.
it?
My answer. But yeah, it's
Well, then what can I do about it? Because sometimes it's too big. And that's what leads us to God, honestly, in the end.
that's
In
what,
the end,
yeah,
this is too much. I can't, we're children. This is why I like to think of God as Divine Mother. Mommy, this is just more than I can handle.
yeah,
You've got to help me.
yeah. I feel like being physically ill has brought me to prayer, like
Yeah.
true prayer. Like I'm so scared of feeling this way because I'm so scared of, am I dying? And I'm going to the doctors and I'm running all the tests. And ultimately, I have like been saying, yeah, I can't, it's too big. I need assistance. I need to understand, what am I missing? What am I not seeing? What am I not listening to that has caused this accumulation in my body?
And so now you ask the question, so is it bad that your body feels badly if it's bringing you to a realization that you would never be able to come to except for this experience?
Yeah.
That's a really hard question. But you see, that's how faith is actually built. Because we look at the most horrible, unwelcome thing that ever happened to us and realize that I would never have gotten to this point of understanding, if that hadn't happened, so was that actually bad that happened? And then we think, if this, and then it comes this way: Divine Mother loves me. She wants me to be free. If the only way to freedom is through the, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, if that is the only way to freedom, would I want her not to take me there? And that's where faith really comes from. Because then when the next horrible thing happens, which inevitably it will, either to you or to the planet,
Yeah.
or to your friend who suddenly leaves, and their family, whatever it might be, you remember that the last horrible thing led me into light. So is this a horrible thing that's happening, or is this just another journey into light? And then you end up, suddenly you realize that I have faith, and you didn't exactly know how you got there, but what you actually had was experience. And when you think of all your incarnations as just being a continuous story, and death just being the cover, the cover closes on that one, and then the next volume opens, you just think, oh, well, if the cover is closing on this one, this horrible experience must also be taking me somewhere that I really need to go, because Divine Mother wouldn't take me there if there was an easier way. Your friend who just left her body, or their body, Divine Mother would not have taken them out of that body if it wasn't the way to freedom. Well, it was just over. If that body had served them any longer, they would have stayed in it.
Yeah.
Unless they took their own life, which is different. But if it just was taken from them, yeah. Hmm.
Wow. This was amazing. I mean, this episode felt like it was very much for me. Normally, I just want to share things for others. And yes, of course, I'm always interested, but um, this couldn't have come at a better time for my personal self and how deep I've been in a process that has been really challenging every ounce of faith, trust, sanity that I have. And
Hmm.
the only thing that's gotten me through is the knowing that like wherever this is taking me is going to be for a greater purpose, for me to share with more wisdom, for me to help with more information. And I'm just moving in whatever direction I feel like the divine is taking me. It's bigger than me.
It's just, I because of Ishani, who sort of makes all this happen for me, I've talked to a lot of people. And, as soon as we started, I thought, oh my goodness, this is a sister.
Oh,
We're good. Yeah, we're really going to be able to talk. This is not just going to
so
be,
honored. Yeah.
no, because I don't know, I don't know you. But no, as soon as we started, I thought, oh goody, this is a real friend.
Oh,
Yeah.
that means it's an honor.
Oh, well, to me too. I mean, I love meeting kindred spirits.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very important.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Your
You
words
know,
have
it,
carried me through a lot of really hard times this last few months.
if there's anything that I can do to help you, I mean, more, just where we really talk, if you really want to, I'm not imposing it, but if at any point you think a conversation would be helpful, or if you want to just run something past me and see if it would, I'm very available. I'd be very, very happy to do that. I do it all the time, and it's super easy for me.
My last question is, why do you wear blue? I wore this to honor you, but I don't really know
Thank
the
you.
reason.
No, I mean, you're undoubtedly familiar with swamis who wear orange. Swami Swami Kriyananda created what he called the Naya Swami order, which is my last name. Naya means new. He felt that many of the rules and regulations are not honored anymore, because they were from many centuries ago, and that the whole idea of renunciation and sannyas that being a Swami represents needs to be reinvented for our times. So I'm actually a Swami, but our color is blue, because the orange color, and when I'm in the company of orange clad swamis, I don't want to make them I want to say it correctly, but orange represents fire, and it's everything that you're giving up, you're burning it up. Blue represents the color of cosmic consciousness, the color of Christ consciousness. So it represents where we're going. And so it's more like in these days where everything understanding is expanding, we can talk more about where we're going. We don't have to just talk about what we're leaving behind. And there's certain um, loosenings of restrictions, but not in its essential nature. But for example, if a married couple wants to be sannyasis, wants to be swamis, they don't have to renounce their relationship. They just move it into this, which is a very big change. But otherwise, I live for God, and everything else is secondary to that. And so I always wear blue. And the only part of taking this vow, which was 15 years ago, was that I had to give up my wardrobe.
Don't be afraid. When I had one blue shirt, I was like, one.
Oh,
I'm very into
I
fashion.
loved color. I had all these wonderful clothes, and but I put them in my guest room and I invited everyone over and they just went away. But that was the only part that took effort on my part was to took me only 3 to 4 days, but still.
How can people reach you, or for anyone watching who is interested in your teachings and to learn more, where can they find you?
Well, Instagram, YouTube. I have a website called Asha Joy. It really, if you just type my name in, it shows up all over the place
Amazing.
because of Shani. Okay.
As always, feel free to reach out to Conscious Concierge for any guidance or just resources on the path of consciousness and just as a friend, etc.
Yeah,
At
wonderful.
Your Conscious Concierge on Instagram and www.yourconsciousconcierge.com.
Okay, perfect.